ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्म स्थापन रतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. Here we are studying Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga, and today we are entering a new series. As I told you in the last turn, the series delivered in London is over. After that, the series in London we had already finished in Practical Vedanta. Now a new series, though chronologically earlier, but included in the book later, is from New York classes on Jnana Yoga. And the first lecture in that series is the cosmos, the macrocosm, delivered in New York, 19th January 1896. Those lectures were June to November 1896. Now January. So, now first let us think of the name of that lecture. What is the cosmos? In Sanskrit we call it samashti. Is it different from the universe? Universe only means this whatever we see, feel, touch, the variety. But when you think of it as an ordered unit, as a regulated unit, complex and orderly system or entity, then it is called cosmos. Cosmos is same as universe. While universe is only a collection, cosmos is a systematic view of that collection. As a complex and orderly system or entity, then we call it cosmos. So Swamiji is going to talk about the entire universe, but seeing that as an orderly unit. And within that, there are two lectures by Swamiji on cosmos on two different subtopics. And the first one which we are taking today is called the macrocosm. What is a macrocosm? Any large complex structure that contains smaller structure, that is the macrocosm. Large complex structure that contains smaller structures. So smaller structures are our bodies, pinda, and the bigger structure is the Brahmanda. So Swamiji is now first talking of what we call the external universe, the external ordered universe, external gross universe, which appears that there is some order in it. That is the topic. Now, the London lectures were based on Upanishads, and Swamiji had a Upanishad book in his hand every time. Here if we see on what this lecture is based upon, the beginning, Swamiji has quoted the first few lines of Nasadiya Sukta. In Vedas, other than Upanishads, there are certain hymns which deal with the Advaita Vedanta, which deal with the absolute reality. They are not a big like the Upanishads, so they are called suktas, hymns. And there is a sukta called Nasadiya Sukta. Starting from the first word of that sukta, Na sadasit, na sadasit tadanim. So, From that, Swamiji is quoting the opening line. And at the end, we shall see Swamiji is ending this lecture with a quotation from Shveta Upanishad. So, on what this lecture is based, you have to understand that it is not based upon a particular Upanishad. It is based upon Nasadiya Sukta, ending in a verse from Shveta Upanishad. This is the external examination. Now, what it contains? What it contains, let me tell in a nutshell before we enter. Swamiji accepts the Darwinian theory of evolution with some provisions. That we shall deal with that. But let me tell you the subject matter. Swamiji says Darwin's evolution is acceptable to us if and but. If. Evolution cannot be. Evolution only means appearance in a different form. Evolution, if something new comes out, which was not there, then science will not agree to that. Science cannot accept that something can be created out of nothing. And so, if there is evolution, it means presentation in another form. And then, seeing the nature, somebody will show that if they accept that each evolution is preceded by an involution, the final product of the evolution was involved, and from that involution, again it comes as evolution. Swamiji says if the scientists accept this fact of involution, we have no quarrel with them. On the other hand, they will become supporters of all the religious theories, the Darwin people. Unfortunately, they have no idea of this. But Swamiji is pointing out that he will talk in harmony with the modern theories, especially the theory of evolution, provided they accept involution. Now what happens if we accept involution? It becomes a cyclic motion. Involution, evolution, involution, evolution. And a big difference comes. Please note down mind the points. When the Big Bang theory or some theories we see, universe was not there and came into existence. But this cyclic theory tells us that it is anadi, it is without a beginning. There is nothing called first evolution, nothing called first srishti. We see in nature, a seed becomes tree, tree and again gives seed. Seed becomes tree, tree again gives seed. So which was first? We can never tell. So it is without a beginning. Anyway, with this in view, let us enter the lecture. So, two changes. First is evolution accepted, provided they accept involution, and as soon as involution is accepted, it becomes a cyclic motion. Swamiji starts, the flowers that we see all around us are beautiful. Beautiful is the rising of the morning sun. Beautiful are the variegated hues of nature. Now we cannot read it like a rapid reader. We have to understand each word. And the word which has been repeated here thrice, we must understand. What is beautiful? How to define that this thing as beauty or this is beautiful? Now, it is not only the eyes, though Swamiji has described scenes. The flowers that we see all around us are beautiful. Beautiful is the rising of the morning sun. Beautiful are the variegated hues of nature. But if you go by beauty, by seeing, that which has given joy to us is called beautiful. Beautiful can be easily defined as that the vision of which has given us joy. And if we extend this definition a bit, the experience of which has given us joy. Because in the original Bengali Kathamrut, from which Gospel has been translated, in translation they have put 3 different words. But in the original, when Master Masha entered Sri Ramakrishna's room, he said, "How beautiful is the place." Was that physically pleasing to his eyes? Beautiful is the man. And how beautiful is his speech. No, speech is not a physical form to see. So the thing we understand is experience has given him joy. That is called beautiful. Now what is the reaction in our mind of that beautiful? Swamiji says in the next sentence, the whole universe is beautiful and man has been enjoying it since his appearance on earth. Man has appeared on the earth. Earth is going on. And as man appears, he sees the beauty and enjoys it. So beautiful or sundar or saundarya generally leads to a sense of enjoyment. I enjoy that. It gives me joy. So it is beautiful. So seeing the nature, the tendency in man is to enjoy that beauty. But there is the other side to it. Sublime and awe-inspiring are the mountains. Sublime also is beautiful. But the reaction in our mind is different. So the word is different. Beautiful has given us joy and a tendency of enjoyment has come. Sublime has given us joy and it has raised our mind to higher spheres. That is called sublime. Examples are given. Himalayas are sublime. We are not going there to enjoy something. But the very sight of Himalayas raises our mind towards infinity. So, sublime also is beautiful. It has also given us joy, but it has not produced a tendency to enjoy it. The tendency produced for the mind is to go higher and higher. That is the difference between sublimity and beauty. Sublimity is that beauty which is, instead of giving a sense of enjoyment, gives a rise to our mind. So the other side of nature Swamiji is presenting now. Sublime and awe-inspiring. What is awe? Awe is a fear-like reaction due to too much respect. It is not fear. It is not a tiger that we are fearing. But so great is the person, so great that we feel hesitant to approach him. That is called awe. So the sublimity has these properties. The Himalayas are sublime, and even to think of it, we are stunned. How great it is. The feeling of that which gives the feeling of greatness. Too much greatness sometimes. That is called awe-inspiring. So, nature, one side is beautiful, we feel like enjoying, but the other side is that it is sublime and awe-inspiring. What are they? Sublime and awe-inspiring are the mountains, Himalayas, Alps, Caucasus. The gigantic rushing rivers rolling towards the sea, gigantic rivers rushing, rolling towards the sea, they are also sublime and awe-inspiring. From where they start, how they are moving, how they are going. The trackless deserts, all this gives an idea of infinity again. Trackless desert, that means this side, everywhere desert. Such a place is sublime and awe-inspiring. The infinite ocean. Ocean is beautiful. Do we go to enjoy it? Ocean, yes, people do go. I remember when we went to take a sea bath in Mumbai, Zoo Beach. After coming back, the devotees asked her, did you enjoy sea bath? No, enjoy is a different thing. We felt sublimity there. We felt holiness and purity there. The mind was raised above. So, Sri Ramakrishna has said, it is difficult to conceive of infinity unless one has seen Himalayas or the ocean. Both things are included here with some other things. Sublime and awe-inspiring are the mountains, the gigantic rushing rivers rolling towards the sea, the trackless deserts, the infinite ocean, the starry heaven. That is another idea of infinity, the starry heaven. All these are awe-inspiring, sublime and beautiful indeed. Beautiful indeed. That means that has given us joy, but not the tendency of enjoyment, but to analyze, and mind goes higher. The whole mass of existence which we call nature, so particular example Swamiji has given, and then he generalizes. The whole mass of existence which we call nature has been acting on the human mind since time immemorial. It acts on the human mind in two ways just now we have seen. When it appears only beautiful, the tendency to enjoy it comes. When it appears sublime and awe-inspiring, the mind goes higher. So it is working on the mind, both these types. Since time immemorial, it has been acting on the thought of man. And as its reaction has come out the question, what are these, whence are they? So it is not acting only on the feeling to enjoy, but it is acting on the thought of man. And he is stunned and he asks, what are they? That means, what is their real nature? Whence are they? What is their origin? So these questions, two questions come because of the sublimity and awe-inspiring nature. And also beautiful that what is their real nature and from what is their origin, from what they have come. This we have to deal with. So Swamiji has opened this talk with describing the outside universe, and it acts upon the mind in two ways. One is to go and enjoy it. The second is awe-inspiring, sublime, which makes us search for their reality and their origin. As far back as the time of the oldest portion of that most ancient human composition, the Vedas, we find the same question asked. So, time immemorial, Swamiji says, the oldest book known to mankind is Vedas, and there this question was asked in the Nasadiya Sukta. Whence is this? When there was neither aught nor not, and darkness was hidden in darkness, who projected this universe? How? Who knows the secret? So these are the various questions raised in the beginning of that Nasadiya Sukta. Whence is this? That means from where it has come. When there was neither ought nor not. This is an important statement. Generally we divide the reality between asti and nasti, is and is not. But that does not cover the entire universe. There are certain things which are, whether they are or whether they are not, difficult to analyze. And so some other category remains. So there was neither ought nor not. We cannot say this thing is not there. And then darkness was hidden in darkness. That means something was there but we did not know. Who projected this universe? So partly answers, partly questions. The idea comes, somebody has projected this universe. Not created, projected, spread out. How? What was the method of projection? Who knows the secret? So, the secret, somebody knows or even somebody does not know. These are the questions raised in the opening of Nasadiya Sukta. And this Swamiji has presented to us as the outside nature acting on the human thought has brought out these questions. And the question has come down to us at the present time, though it is mentioned in the Vedic Suktas. Even today, when we look at nature, we do feel these very questions. If the mind is analytical, if the mind is prone to enjoyment, these questions will not arise. We will go and enjoy. But if the mind is purer, this sublimity, this awe-inspiring nature will raise these questions in us. Today even. Millions of attempts have been made to answer it. Millions attempts. Every man has attempted. Every man whose thought has worked upon, every man who has not got into enjoyment, every man who has felt the sublimity, awe-inspiring nature, immediately he tries to answer this question. He searches his own mind. He may search books. He may search the gurus. But he searches in the ultimate end his own mind. And so, question has been asked even today. Answer has been, attempts at answer have been made millions of times. That means each individual whose mind was acted upon in that way has thought of the answer. Yet millions of times it will have to be answered again. Because each individual will have to find his own answer. Even if the answer is given in books, each individual has to convince, each individual has to find out his own. So two things Swamiji told, million times it has been, attempt has been made to answer, million times it will have to be answered again. That means every individual, thoughtful individual has tried to answer, and thoughtful individuals will always seek answers. It is not that each answer was a failure. Every answer to this question contained a part of truth. And this truth gathers strength as time rolls on. Somebody finds a little, somebody finds still deeper, somebody goes still deeper. In this way it is going on. I will try to present before you the outline of the answer that I have gathered from the ancient philosophers of India in harmony with modern knowledge. Ancient philosophers have found some answer. That Swamiji is trying to present. Swamiji has told in the next lecture that I will not tell anything new. I am telling you that which has been discovered. But it is told in archaic language. Shankara has interpreted in his language of his times, and Swamiji is recapitulating that very thing before us in modern language. So, Swamiji is presenting before us the answer in harmony with modern knowledge. So, because they were influenced by modern knowledge so much, unless it is in harmony with modern knowledge, we reject it. And the modern knowledge means, Swamiji here is meaning chiefly the Darwinian theory of evolution. And while harmoniously presenting it, Swamiji wants that Darwinian theory also to adapt it, also to include the theory of evolution, also to include the theory of cyclic changes, then it will be in harmony. So that is what is Swamiji's attempt. Now, starts with the answers. We find that in the oldest of questions, a few points had been already solved. We have seen that. The first is that there was a time when there was neither ought nor not. That means the existence which we see was not there, but something was there. This is the answer. That from that something this has come. Nothing can come out of nothing. So this which we see was not there. But there was something, and Swamiji will tell it is best to call it God. So there was something, and that's why neither ought nor not, this was not there, but there was something. And from that this has come. So this is a part of the answer. When this world did not exist, our Mother Earth with the seas and oceans, the rivers and mountains, cities and villages, human races, animals, plants, birds and planets and luminaries, sun, moon and stars. All this infinite variety of creation had no existence. Unless we think of that time, we cannot know the real nature. Because the variety acts upon our mind and we get lost there, thinking it to be real. But the human mind goes back to think there was a time when this was not there. Nothing of this was there. Are we sure of that? That means Swamiji is now trying to provide reason to understand this point that this was not there but something was there. So that Swamiji says, are we sure of that? We will try to trace how this conclusion is arrived at. That this was not there but something was there, how it has been arrived at. What does a man see around him? So again, seeing the nature, we are finding out the answer. Take a little plant. He puts a seed in the ground and later he finds a plant peep out. Lift itself slowly above the ground and grow till it becomes a gigantic tree. Then it dies, leaving only the seed, maybe many seeds. It completes this circle. It comes out of the seed, becomes the tree, and ends in the seed again. This is what we are saying. Look at a bird, how from the egg it springs, lives its life, and then dies, leaving other eggs. That is seeds of future birds. So with the animals, so with man. Everything in nature begins as it were from certain seeds, certain rudiments, certain fine forms, and becomes grosser and grosser and develops. Going on that way for a certain time and then again goes back to that fine form and subsides. This is what our view of the entire universe. The raindrop in which the beautiful sunbeam is playing was drawn in the form of vapor from the ocean, went far away into the air and reached a region where it changed into water and dropped down in the present form to be converted again into vapor again. So with everything in nature by which we are surrounded. Everything. Swamiji has given some examples and then generalized. We know that the huge mountains are being worked upon by glaciers and rivers which are slowly but surely pounding them and pulverizing them into sand that drifts away into the ocean where it settles down on its bed, layer after layer, becoming hard as rocks, once more to be heaped up into mountains of a future generation. Again they will be pounded and pulverized. So from smaller time units he has gone to big time units. And thus the course goes on. From sand rise these mountains, unto sand they go. So this is our observation. If it be true, what could be? If it be true means what we think as law of nature depends upon uniformity everywhere. Now there is a doubt about that uniformity. So, proper thinking, Swamiji says, if it be true that nature is uniform throughout, because in our mind we feel it is uniform. If it be true, and so far no human experience has contradicted it, so it should be true that the same method under which a small grain of sand is created works in creating the gigantic suns and stars and all this universe. If it be true that the whole of this universe is built on exactly the same plan as the atom, if it be true that the same law prevails throughout the universe, then as it has been said in the Vedas, knowing one lump of clay, we know the nature of all the clay that is in the universe. So depending upon the law of universality, we say that everything will be known if we know the source from which it is made. Take up a little plant and study its life, and we know the universe as it is. If we know one grain of sand, we understand the secret of the whole universe. Applying this course of reasoning to phenomena, so particulars, uniformity of law, apply the uniformity of law the entire universe. Most logical, we find in the first place that everything is almost similar at the beginning and the end. The mountain comes from the sand and goes back to the sand. The river comes out of vapor and goes back to vapor. Plant life comes from the seed and goes back to the seed. Human life comes out of human germs and goes back to human germs. The universe with its stars and planets has come out of a nebulous state and must go back to it. Nebulous means unevolved, unformed. What do we learn from this? That the manifested or the grosser state is the effect and the finer state the cause. Seed is the finer state, tree is the effect. So the entire universe, from finer cause, it has become gross. Thousands of years ago, it was demonstrated by Kapila the great father of all philosophies, that destruction means going back to the cause. Destruction means going back to the cause. That was demonstrated thousands of years ago by Kapila in his Sankhya system. If this table here is, I am just giving an example. If this table here is destroyed, it will go back to its cause, to those fine forms and particles which combined made this form which we call a table. If a man dies, he will go back to the elements which gave him his body. If this earth dies, it will go back to the elements which gave it form. This is what is called destruction, going back to the cause. Therefore, we learn that the effect is the same as the cause, not different. Yes, it has come from the cause, gone back to the cause, some form is changed, so the effect is same as the cause. It is only in another form, only form is changed. Another example, this glass is an effect and it had its cause, and this cause is present in this form. What are the causes? A certain amount of the material called glass plus the force in the hands of the manufacturer are the causes. The instrumental and the material. Instrumental means that force which is in the hands of the man, and material means glass pieces or atoms, which combined produce this form called a glass. The force which was in the hands of the manufacturer is present in the glass as the power of adhesion. How the particles are sticking to each other? Because there was a force in the hands of the creator who made this. That has become adhesion, without which the particles would fall apart. And the glass material is also present. The glass is only a manifestation of these fine causes in a new shape, and if it be broken to pieces, the force which was present in the form of adhesion will go back and join its own element, and the particles of glass will remain the same until they take new forms. Okay. Thus we find that the effect is never different from the cause. It is only that this effect is a reproduction of the cause in a grosser form. Next, another point. We learn that all these particular forms which we call plants, animals or men are being repeated ad infinitum. Once we accept that the evolution presupposes involution, this is what is come. Going on, seed becomes tree, tree leaves seed, seed becomes tree. That is how it is going on, eternally. Repeated ad infinitum, rising and falling. The seed produces the tree produces the seed, which again comes up as another tree, and so on and on. There is no end to it. Water drops roll down the mountains into the ocean and rise again as vapor, go back to the mountains and again come down to the ocean. So, rising and falling, this cycle goes on. So with all lives, so with all existence that we can see, feel, hear or imagine. See, feel, hear or imagine, entire universe comes from a subtler form, becomes gross, goes back to subtler form. Everything that is within the bounds of our knowledge is proceeding in the same way, like breathing in and breathing out in the human body. Everything in creation goes on in this form. One wave rising, another falling, rising again, falling again. Each wave has its hollow, each hollow has its wave. The same law must apply to the universe taken as a whole because of its uniformity. Accepting the uniformity, if it is applying to different things in the universe, it applies to the universe as a whole. The universe must be resolved into its causes. The sun, moon, stars and earth, the body and mind, and everything in this universe must return to their finer causes, disappear, be destroyed as it were, because when it's fine we do not see. But they will live in the cause as they form, as fine forms. Out of these fine forms they will emerge again as new earths, suns, moons and stars. Now one more thing, how gradually Swamiji is showing us the thing. There is one fact more to learn about this rising and falling. The seed comes out of the tree, it does not immediately become a tree, but has a period of inactivity, or rather a period of very fine unmanifested activity, action. The seed has to work for some time beneath the soil. It breaks into pieces, degenerates as it were, and regeneration comes out of the degeneration. In the beginning, the whole of this universe has to work through likewise for a period in that minute form, unseen and unmanifested, which is called chaos, pralaya. And out of that comes a new projection. So, Srishti and Pralaya are alternately going on. From the small things, Swamiji has generalized and given us this view. The whole period of one manifestation of this universe, it's going down into the finer forms, remaining there for some time and coming out again is in Sanskrit called a kalpa or a cycle. That is the idea of the kalpa. Next comes a very important question. So up till now, coming to finer and grosser and staying in that finer form for some time, working there in fine way. Next comes a very important question, especially for modern time. Now it brings that evolution. We see that the finer forms develop slowly and slowly and gradually become grosser and grosser. We have seen that the cause is the same as the effect, and the effect is only the cause in another form. Therefore, this whole universe cannot be produced out of nothing. So that is the science. Nothing comes without a cause, and the cause is the effect in another form. Out of what has this universe been produced then? From a preceding fine universe. So it is already there. Out of what has man been produced? The preceding fine form. Out of what has the tree been produced? Out of the seed. The whole of the tree was there in the seed. It comes out and becomes manifest. This is exactly called evolution. So the whole of this universe has been created out of this very universe existing in a minute form. It has been made manifest now. It becomes gross, then it becomes manifest. It will go back to that minute form and again will be made manifest. Now we find that the fine forms slowly come out and become grosser and grosser until they reach their limit. So there is a limit to becoming gross and then start going back. And when they reach their limit, they go back further and further, becoming finer and finer again. This coming out of the fine and becoming gross, simply changing the arrangements of its parts as it were, is what in modern times is called evolution. This is very true, perfectly true. We see it in our lives. No rational man can possibly quarrel with these evolutionists, but we have to learn one thing more. We have to go one step further. And what is that? That every evolution is preceded by an involution. The seed is the father of the tree, but another tree was itself the father of the seed. The seed is the fine form out of which the big tree comes, and another big tree was the form which is involved in that seed. The whole of this universe is present in the cosmic fine universe. The little cell which becomes afterwards the man was simply the involved man and becomes evolved as a man. Otherwise, the nothing coming out of nothing will fail in the scientific terms. If this is clear, we have no quarrel with the evolutionists. For we see that if they admit this step, instead of their destroying religion, they will be the greatest supporters of it. This destroying religion was happening in England, that God created one day and it grew. And the evolutionists told, no, it is from the finest form that this has grown. So it's for destroying that religious theory. But if we accept that already there was an involution and then evolution, then it will not destroy the religious ideas. We see then that nothing can be created out of nothing. Everything exists through eternity and will exist through eternity. Only the movement is in the succeeding waves and hollows, going back to fine forms and coming out into gross manifestation. This involution and evolution is going on throughout the whole of universe, nature. The whole series of evolution, beginning with the lowest manifestation of life and reaching up to the highest. What is the highest manifestation of life? Not only man. Darwinian theory shows up to man, but inside man the mind evolves. And where it reaches? The highest, the most perfect man must have been the involution of something else. The question is, the involution of what? What was involved? Now Swamiji gives the answer, God. You have to understand God in this way. When the universe was not there, what existed was God. And God himself has become this universe and will again become God. The evolutionist will tell you that your idea that it was God is wrong. Why? Because you see, God is intelligent. But we find that intelligence develops much later on in the course of evolution. Now Darwinian objection to God being the origin. Now what to think of God here? Consciousness. Intelligence, Swamiji calls it. In those days that was called intelligence, but that is consciousness, Chaitanya. And while manifestation, we see earth for so many billions of years, stars for so many billions of years, and then life came, or intelligence came. That is what the Darwinian theory tells us. But if we access involution, then this highest point was already involved. Otherwise from nothing it cannot come. It is in man and the higher animals that we find intelligence. But millions of years have passed in this world before this intelligence came. This objection of the evolutionist does not hold water, as we shall see by applying our theory. Involution and then evolution. Then it does not apply at all. The tree comes out of the seed, goes back to the seed. The beginning and the end are the same. The earth comes out of its cause and returns to it. We know that if we can find the beginning, we can find the end. E converso. If we find the end, we can find the beginning. If that is so, uniformity, take this whole evolutionary series from the protoplasm at one end to the perfect man at the other, and this whole series is one life. In the end, we find the perfect man, so in the beginning it must have been the same. Therefore, the protoplasm was the involution of the highest intelligence. Yes, manifestation may be later, but it is already there. You may not see it, but that involved intelligence is what is uncoiling itself until it becomes manifested in the most perfect man. When it is not manifested, we do not see it. We see the gross form only. Is what is uncoiling itself until it becomes manifested in the most perfect man. That can be mathematically demonstrated, logically. If the law of conservation of energy is true, you cannot get anything out of a machine unless you put it in there first. The amount of work that you get out of an engine is exactly the same as you have put into it in the form of water and coal, neither more nor less. The work I am doing now is just what I put into me in the shape of air, food and other things. It is only a question of change and manifestation. Change of form and manifestation. There cannot be added in the economy of this universe one particle of matter or 1 foot-pound of force, nor can one. Now people will say nowadays this is not true, dark hole is there. We have only half found out. It has gone back to the origin. It has become fine, you do not see it. Nor can one particle of matter or 1 foot-pound of force be taken. In Swamiji's days, this was the conservation of law of matter and conservation of energy. So Swamiji is talking in those terms. If they are interconvertible, well, fine. That is something which is converted into both of them. If that be the case, what is this intelligence? If it was not present in the protoplasm, it must have come all of a sudden. Something coming out of nothing, which is absurd. So from science itself, Swamiji shows. It therefore follows absolutely that the perfect man, the free man, the God man, who has gone beyond the laws of nature and transcended everything, who has no more to go through this process of evolution, through birth and death, that man called the Christ man by the Christians, the Buddha man by the Buddhists and the free by the yogis, that perfect man who is at one end of the chain of evolution was involved in the cell of the protoplasm, which is at the other end of the same chain. Beautiful. Applying the same reason to the whole of the universe, we should finish it today. Even if it takes 5-10 minutes more, please allow, because this is one continuity. Applying the same reason to the whole of the universe, we see that intelligence must be the lord of creation, the cause. What is the most evolved notion that man has of this universe? It is intelligence. The adjustment of part to part, the display of intelligence, of which the ancient design theory was an attempt at expression. We have to think of this design theory. What was the design theory? This is an argument for the existence of God. It points to evidence that suggests our world works well. That is, it was designed in a specific way. The argument follows that if it was designed like this, then someone or something must have designed it. Example, trees take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. That is how we live. The earth is uniquely placed in the solar system, not too near the sun to burn, not too far to freeze. So this arrangement shows that somebody has arranged it. He has designed it like this. And this design theory rejects the theory of chance and rejects this Big Bang theory also. The philosopher who introduced this was William Paley, 1743 to 1805. It was in 18th century. Human body. How wonderful is this organization of human body? So, there is somebody behind it. That is the design theory. Now, design theory has some drawbacks also. Why there is evil in this world if it was designed properly? So, Swamiji has said design theory was an attempt at expression. So, later on, the evil also can be explained. Everything can be explained when we go to the impersonal God as we were described already, and Maya said so. So, all this can be explained, but design theory was the original attempt at expression. Shankaracharya says in a Chatusutri Bhashya, Manasapi achintya rupasya, even by mind we cannot imagine how this world has been made, and yet it is going on. The beginning was there for intelligence. At the beginning that intelligence becomes involved, and in the end that intelligence gets evolved. The sum total of the intelligence displayed in the universe must therefore be the involved universal intelligence unfolding itself. This universal intelligence is what we call God. Must understand an important thing. People who think of God says God is a power, God is an energy. That is not the main idea. Main idea is God is consciousness. And because it is consciousness, universal, it has power. So, this we must know that when we think of God, we must know that when the universe did not exist, He existed. Point number one. Point number two is consciousness. Call it by any other name. It is absolutely certain that in the beginning there is that infinite cosmic intelligence. Call it by any name you like. Call it cosmic intelligence. Call it Brahman. Call it Allah, Jehovah. This cosmic intelligence gets involved and it manifests, evolves itself until it becomes the perfect man. So the end is in this perfected man, he is God. The Christ man, the Buddha man, then it goes back to its own source. That is why all the scriptures say, in him we live and move and have our being, because God is the material cause also. That is why all the scriptures preach that we come from God and go back to God. Do not be frightened by theological terms. Theological means God they believe in and they make theories. So the science people do not believe it, they were afraid. If terms frighten you, you are not fit to be philosophers. The cosmic intelligence is what the theologians call God. I have been asked, now Swamiji is explaining the word, I have been asked many times, why do you use that old word God? Because it is the best word for our purpose. You cannot find a better word than that. Because all the hopes, aspirations and happiness of humanity has been centered in that word. It is impossible now to change the word. Words like these were first coined by great saints who realized their import and understood their meaning. But as they become current in society, ignorant people take these words and the result is that they lose their spirit and glory. Original meaning is lost. And some idea comes to the ignorant people and they associate those ideas. Therefore, people can criticize them, not in the original ideas. If there is a coin after long usage, you don't see what it is. So they lose their original meaning when used by people. Lose their spirit and glory. The word God has been used from time immemorial, and the idea of this cosmic intelligence and all that is great and holy is associated with it. Do you mean to say that because some fool says it is not all right, we should throw it away? Another man may come and say, take my word, another again my word, take my word. So there will be no end to foolish words. Use the old word, only use it in the true spirit, cleanse it of all superstition, and realize fully what this great ancient word means. So the ideas, low ideas associated with God has to be removed and see its original meaning. If you understand the power of the laws of association, you will know that these words are associated with innumerable majestic and powerful ideas, God. They have been used and worshipped by millions of human souls and associated by them with all that is highest and best, all that is rational, all that is lovable, and all that is great and grand in human nature. Not only rational but lovable. And they come as suggestions of these associations, the word God, and cannot be given up. If I try to express all these by only telling you that God created the universe, it would have conveyed no meaning to you. Yet after all this struggle, we have come back to Him, the ancient and the supreme one. I will take a few minutes more. We now see that all the various forms of cosmic energy, such as all the forms, matter, thought, force, intelligence and so forth, are simply the manifestation of that cosmic intelligence, or as we shall call it henceforth, the Supreme Lord. Everything that you see, feel or hear, the whole universe is His creation. Now language correction. Language has to be made finer and finer, slowly. So God has created the entire universe. Ought to be a little more accurate is His projection. Ought to be still more accurate is the Lord Himself. It is He who is shining as the sun and the stars. He is the Mother Earth. He is the ocean Himself. He comes as gentle shower. All that nature now is come like that. He is the gentle air that we breathe in, and He it is who is working as force in the body. He is the speech that is uttered. He is the man who is talking. He is the audience that is there. He is the platform on which I stand. That is the Sarva Apitva. He is the light that enables me to see your faces. It is all He. He Himself is both the material and the efficient cause of this universe. He Himself has become, He Himself has created. And He it is that gets involved in minute cell and evolves at the other end and becomes God again. God man. He it is that comes down and becomes the lowest atom and slowly unfolding his nature rejoins himself. This is the mystery of the universe. So mystery solved. Now from the quotes from the Shatashatur Upanishad. Thou art the man, thou art the woman, thou art the strong man walking in the pride of youth, thou art the old man tottering on crutches, thou art in everything, thou art everything, O Lord, in everything and everything. This is the only solution of the cosmos that satisfies the human intellect. In one word, we are born of Him, we live in Him, and unto Him we return. So Swamiji has harmonized it with the theory of evolution, if they have to accept that, and the cyclic theory. In this way, this lecture beautifully ends, showing that God, from God we have come, we are in God, we have to go back. Om Paratatve Sadalino Ramakrishna Samagya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Vire Shankam Namamyam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hare Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamasti.